Welcome to the Aftershow of The Connection Effect. I'm your host, Bill Groner. Today, we have Sahar, our Director of Operations, who brings with her a background as an 8th grade math teacher, years in the world of corporate culture, and now recently a graduate of the program at University of Pennsylvania, getting a master's in applied positive psychology. Sahar was my classmate. Also today, we have Courtney, our esteemed executive producer, who with her vast world experience and her journalism degree from Columbia University brings to us some unique perspectives. Today, we will discuss the podcast I just hosted with Scott Barry Kaufman, centered on self-actualization and how we can be our best selves and live our best life. So, ladies, it was a pretty heavy session, and we could talk probably for a long time about all the different pieces that Scott Barry Kaufman brought to the party, but we've identified in advance a few things that resonated that we wanted to discuss. The first place I think I'd like to start, get your thoughts and feedback on, is Scott talked about that in building this sailboat, the hull of the sailboat, which is going to basically sail to the place that you want it to go so you can self-actualize. The hull is built with safety, security, self-esteem, building personal relationships. I believe his point was that we're creating a base of security and comfort before we raise the sail, and the sail is exploration and growth. And I really loved this concept because I'm constantly thinking about how we need to take care of ourselves first before we can be our best selves to others. And I wonder how that one really significant point resonated with you, ladies. Sahar, would you like to share?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say that I loved the sailboat metaphor because even as someone who studied psychology in college, it was always the pyramid. Like that was what we learned. I think a lot of people who are listening probably have, unless they're familiar with Scott's work, didn't know that there was another way to kind of depict what Maslow came up with. So I really did love that. And that, like stability, he mentioned in the episode that like stability isn't enough for growth. Like you said, it's incredibly important for us to have those pieces of the hull, but until you put the sail up, like that's where growth occurs.
Obviously, I'm the layperson here representing the people who aren't as deeply steeped in psychology, academia, but I too have heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what I loved about what Bill interrogated in Scott's depiction of this or redepiction of it as a sailboat was, when you think about a pyramid, there's this inherent climb with a pyramid. It's the goal is to get to the top and each thing supports the other. But the way Bill sort of helped clarify how the sailboat works is that, sometimes the sail is down and sometimes it's up. Sometimes it catches the wind, sometimes it doesn't. And I really appreciated that it doesn't have to be, the exact progression step by step. Yes, you need that base foundation, but it's not always going to go exactly in this one direction.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think his point was once you have that base, then you can sail in multiple directions. Your exploration and growth can go into different places. But I am stuck on what you've got to do to get the boat to be worthy of the water. When I left my previous career as a litigator and retired, I was moving in another direction, and I didn't know where that was going. But I did know that I needed to arm myself with confidence and security in something different. So I went back and I got the degree with Sahar, which gave me a sense of, I know something. And I met classmates and developed relationships. The whole experience just gave me this base of, I have something that I feel good about, that I can talk about, that's meaningful. It just gave me that confidence to then ask myself, all right, where do I want to go with it? And I had no idea that I wanted to do a master's thesis on connection or start a nonprofit or do this podcast. So I think what Scott's depiction is so important for us all to realize that we need to take care of ourselves first. We need strength, security, and a base and a foundation before we can start looking about where we want to extend ourselves and be vulnerable.
And I just have to say, just to sort of maybe elaborate, again, as the layperson and how I have interpreted Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for me, it's almost a daily experience with that hierarchy of needs. And what I mean is, I know that the base is just what you need to stay alive, right? If I have a bad night's sleep, I am not going to get that sail up at all. If I haven't had enough to eat, don't even think about trying to explore, heady pursuits that day. I just got to make it through the day. And I don't know if that is something captured here or even welcome in this discussion. But for me, my sailboat changes every day. And that's because the foundation changes every day.
Wow. I'm going to talk about the same fabulous point from the opposite. Here's what I often find when little things get on my nerves, when people annoy me, when things annoy me, when I have less tolerance or patience, and I sit and think about it, I realize it's me. It's not the other thing. It's that you're tired, or I'm hungry, or I'm just not in a great emotional state. It's not the thing that I'm reacting to. So from a reverse pivot, I do realize that, yes, I need sleep, food to be in a good state of mind to receive the rest of the world the way it wants to be received.
Yeah. And what I think you're saying is there's a personal responsibility to it, right?
I do. And you're right. If we could all have the habit of checking in with ourselves regularly, and, some people have a morning habit of, I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to work out, I'm going to maybe write in my gratitude journal, I'm going to plan what I want to do today, I'm going to plan what's going to give me joy today. And I'm not that structured. I'm semi-structured to my days. But yeah, I think connecting to yourself and checking in with yourself and then making the plan is going to give you your best day or your best chance for the best day. Do you guys have a morning schedule or ritual to make yourself the best you can be?
I absolutely do, but I want to hear if Sahar does first.
It's something that I've been wanting to do for such a long time because I do not have a great morning routine. So I can't wait to hear Courtney's. Right now, I'm actually focusing more on the evening because I felt like I was trying to put a Band-Aid on in the morning when my evening wasn't actually taking me where I wanted to go and setting myself up for success to have the rest that I needed. And so, yeah, my focus is the other way around for now, but I'm going to get there. That's the goal.
Well, we have talked together, Sahar, about we mutually discovered that we're not actually morning people. And it's almost like these days, everybody is about the morning ritual. And so to admit out loud that you don't love a morning meeting and that you take a while to ease into the day. But I do think it is back to that, I acknowledge who I am each day. Yeah. And I'm going to accommodate myself in a way.
Yeah.
That makes me think of when Scott mentioned in one of the answers, he said, I hate that question.
Actually, I hate that question. I viscerally despise with a burning passion that question.
When I
yes,
I asked him sort of what should we all be doing? And he was annoyed because he was saying, listen, it's not the same thing for everybody. This is an individual plan to self-actualize. And what you're talking about is making me realize, not everybody has to get up in the morning and have that morning plan. If you're not a morning person, maybe your unique path towards being your best self is recognizing that and not planning for the day or not making the phone calls or not doing something that is not comfortable and natural.
Yeah, but also trying new things, which brings me to, and we don't have to stay on the morning forever, but I am a little bit of a culty evangelist about morning pages. I don't know if you've heard about them, but they are similar to the gratitude journal. I spend a lot of time writing in some sort of paper book every morning, and I highly recommend it. And I say this because, one, I think I've heard you say, Bill, that the two proven things are CBT and gratitude journaling, right?
Yeah, yes.
So every morning I do my morning pages. And for those who are not familiar, I do think some psychologists may endorse this as well, but Julia Cameron has a book called The Artist's Way, which I admit to have not read. But the morning pages is a whole spin-off where what it is it's a clean out of whatever's swirling. If you woke up in the middle of the night or you just, it's all swirling and you can't focus because it's all up there. There's no grammar. There's no start, beginning, middle, and end. And I inevitably get into a great flow state and find great things come out of my morning pages. Then I do a Panda planner, which has built-in frameworks for gratitude journaling. And Bill, what you said, looking forward to the joy I'm grateful for, I'm excited about. And those are the first two things you do in your Panda planner. And it's just that reflection. It all comes back to reflection and taking care of what's inside here. I'm pointing to my head for those on audio before you can take care of all that you encounter.
You mentioned, what brings joy during the day, and I casually mentioned it, and I love that the Panda Planner builds that in because I do find sometimes I get caught up in productivity and I'm not allowing enough space at the same time for just the simple joy of life. And
Absolutely.
And maybe that is a great practice also, is like every day to really consider not just gratitude, not just a plan for productivity, but also what's one thing I can do that can bring joy, which sort of makes life a little bit more worth living a bit more.
Actually, Bill, that was one of the things that one of my coaches suggested was make a plan to do one thing that brings me joy. If not every day, then every week. But that was one of the pieces of lifestyle habits that she suggested.
Just to get a little wonky here in positive psychology, what's really cool about joy and the other positive emotions is Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory. And her theory basically says that when you have a positive emotion, it's not just the good stuff that you're feeling in the moment, but positive emotions broaden to other positive emotions, and they also build resources. A perfect example is if somebody has joy at looking at something, let's say they go to a concert, they see a piece of art, whatever brings them joy, and they just get a spark of creativity as a result. And this happens to me a lot when I have joy in looking at great vistas, at a great sunset. It makes me feel creative and say, oh, I want to paint. And then if that results in painting, then that's building resources because you're developing a skill, you're actually developing a body of work. So the simple act of a positive emotion, people think, oh, it's almost, it's fleeting. And under this broaden and build theory, it's anything but.
So, Bill, you mentioned looking out at a vista and feeling joy and awe. And I remember one of the things that we learned was that awe is a pathway to transcendence, which is another thing that Scott talked about in this episode, but that there's so many moments that inspire awe in us that can be really powerful. And so I just wanted to kind of throw it out there because you mentioned the vista. I know that those moments maybe aren't as easily accessible in our day-to-day lives, but it doesn't mean that they're any less important to either seek out or appreciate when they happen.
Let me move to a different piece that Scott loved talking about, which is purpose. And I'll start with paraphrasing one of his quotes, where Scott said that purpose is a North Star. It's a guiding energy that gives us direction. It's not a destination. Pretty heavy. Who wants to start with this?
I mean, I love this. I love talking about purpose because, so he talked about the North Star, right? It's giving you the direction that you're moving. It's not about the destination. It's about the direction and the journey. And so then I was reflecting on, well, what is my North Star? And then this is where Claude and I used some AI just to have it as a thought partner. And we were chatting back and forth about, one of the things that came up for me is a lot of other psychologists and thought leaders in psychology talk about purpose. So you have Simon Sinek, who talks about finding your why. Natalie Kogan talks about the bigger why. And I was trying to parse out what is the difference between those things and what Scott's referring to as the North Star. And so I was reflecting on my own, and if I had to write down kind of a purpose statement, it's that I want to make a positive, meaningful impact in the lives of others. And I was like, well, is that my North Star according to his definition? And so I was digging into it. And in fact, yes, because that's the direction I want to go to. Everything I do, that guides me. And then he mentioned something about purpose. The purpose of life is to witness the preciousness of human experience. And so then I went down a rabbit hole of, can you have multiple purposes? And the answer is yes. There's different types of purpose. There's like the universal and existential purpose that's around that preciousness of human existence. And then there's the personal purpose, which like I have just shared with you. And so it was like a nice way to kind of frame it, because I never thought of it that way, of having these two different types and levels of purpose in my life.
Okay, I just love this literal sort of obsessiveness about the word purpose itself. Being someone who works with words as my living, I went back to the transcript, and first of all, I appreciate the sort of humble way in which Bill shows up and says, I'm confused about the word purpose or what you mean by purpose, because you do something on purpose, meaning with intention, right? And you say like, purpose confuses me because I don't know if that means I'm doing things intentionally or I have purpose, which is like the capital P, right? But I think they obviously feed off each other, right? So doing things on purpose is in service to this larger purpose in life. But me being the one who each day is new and I have to evaluate every single day, some days my purpose is being very present with my children and being a parent that's going to help them be better humans who are also purposeful in the world. Sometimes my purpose is my work and helping people show up as their best selves in formats like this. So I don't, as the novice scholar of psychology, that resonated with me because I can understand a larger purpose, but doing things with purpose.
I love that you brought up the mini purpose and then the big purpose. I'm going to add something in the middle, like the middle P. Firstly, to me, the big P purpose, what is my purpose on this planet, I think is a horrible question, because what a burden to figure that out. And does there have to be an answer? And is it just one answer? That troubles me. The smaller P's are doing things on purpose, feel much more comfortable. You have control. Sahar, you want to have a positive impact on other people. That's a process. That's something that you can wake up and it can guide you during your day, as opposed to saying my purpose is to have this impact on humanity, which you may want to think as, oh, therefore I have to write a book. I have to achieve this certain whatever. And to me, that makes it hard. If there's this goal, this finality, this I've reached it, as opposed to how you're living day to day. The middle P I want to add is short or medium term. So aside from the big P of what am I doing ultimately, or what's my purpose on the planet, and aside from the everyday P, what about where do I want to go in the next 3 months, 6 months, year, or 2 years? Because I think that creates a different self-reflection. It creates a different conversation with yourself. And I think it should be an enjoyable conversation of like in the next few years, what impact would I like to have on myself and my friends and humanity? So I like the short term every day and the medium term stuff, not when I'm gone at my eulogy, what will they say my purpose has been?
Do you feel like there's a difference between, like, that middle P almost reminded me of goal setting, and that the capital P, let's call it that North Star that Scott talks about. He called it a guiding energy that gives us direction. So like, could that be the consistent light that then guides that like kind of middle P, like the goals that we have for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, no, I like using the word goals, and then you're doing things on purpose to achieve those goals. which doesn't mean that you're cheating yourself from doing something important, right? It doesn't mean, oh, well, who knows? That means I have less control over things, or, I'm not moving towards this big thing. I like that. I like short and medium-term goals.
Yeah, and I also just want to call out and underscore that you've given us the permission to not be obsessed with that big thing. Because you're right. It feels like homework, life homework. That's all you're always like kind of behind on. And so I really appreciate that it's not all or nothing. You can still have purpose in life. You can still live with intention, and you can still live with medium-term purpose. But you don't necessarily have to constantly be berating yourself for not having figured out the capital P purpose.
Yeah. I agree with that. And it's making me think that, because I love the connection to self aspect of all of this, which is to be in touch with yourself, your goals, your wants, your desires, your obstacles, your strengths, your weaknesses, your challenges. And then I'm thinking, well, you're not going to be doing that every day, right? You're not going to wake up every day and do that. So this feels like it wants to be an occasional practice where you're checking in with yourself, whether it's taking long walks, whether it's sitting and looking at the water, whatever gets you to a place where you can just be at peace and just self-reflect, and then think about things and think about who you are, where you are, and maybe where you might want to be going.
Can I raise my hand as the lay person who, Bill, I know you went into this conversation with Scott Barry Kaufman really drawn to his work on transcend and transcendence. And to me, that's way beyond my comprehension. And, even when I'm looking back at the transcript, even when he defines it, it feels like almost like, I don't know if I can say this, but like you're on some sort of psychedelic drug in order to describe it. And you can cut this out if you have to. But the way he says it is, to me, transcendence is more horizontal than vertical. It's not about being better than others or being more myself, more transcendent. It's about really your connection to the world. Again, this feels big. Healthy transcendence is as an emergent phenomenon resulting from the harmonious integration of oneself in the service of cultivating the good society. Whew. Yeah. I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think that's aspirational. I don't know that that's practical. I have two thoughts on that. One is, to me, self-actualization, the way he's describing it and the way I perceive it, is not us being the best that we can be, but it's being the best that we want to be. Best we can be seems like, in everything I'm going to be the best. But that doesn't add in the, wait, where's the sail going? What direction? In which ways do you want? So to me, it's what's the best person that we want to be, that requires a lot of volition and a lot of thought and a lot of reflection. So that's my first thought. The second thing, I loved what he said about the harmonious integration of yourself into society, because I think, and this is pretty kumbaya, but if you had a group of people that were in a small community together and living, and each one was self-actualizing, it would seem to me, and I think what he was saying, is that positive energy melds into each other, that you become the best person to yourself, to others, they're the best to you. And then there's a lot of 1 + 1 = 3 that happens. And, maybe there's a little bit of a hive mentality where you're all symbiotic and you're all in the same place. Now, we have a podcast episode with Lawrence Edwards, who is an expert in meditation, and he goes well beyond that. And on the spiritual side, he talks about the yogis that go beyond just themselves and they connect with one, where it is they're connecting with humanity on a sort of a macro level. And if I was going to talk to Scott, again, I would want to talk about that because there's a lot of existential thought and a lot of spirituality here about what he means by this oneness with society.
I know Sahar has a thought, and she wrote it down, so I'm going to interrupt because I did not, and I'm going to lose it. It's calling back something that Scott said to you, and I just want to acknowledge, Bill, that I know Scott blew your mind in the moment, and I think in reflection, like, I think you were thrown off by some of his things. You were expecting one thing and you got another. And one thing he said to you that in listening to the episode, you were like, wait, what is he? He was talking about self-actualization, and not to bring it all the way back to that, but he was like, Bill, you don't want to self-actualize everything. Are you sure? And you were like, but wait, I thought that was the goal. And I just like how you also just now helped yourself and me reframe what transcendence is, and that it doesn't have to be this huge thing. It can be like a micro transcendence or a good enough transcendence, how we define it rather than how some textbook does. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that, because you're right. I mean, if we aspire for too much, if we shoot too high, we're going to lose. I think, in life, we want to get as many wins as we can along the way. And self-actualizing could be a daily practice. How do I make today my best day, given who I am and what do I need to accomplish, as opposed to, for the next, X years of my life.
Sahar, what were you thinking?
Yeah, there's so many things swirling in my head right now. One, since we're on self-actualization, there was something that I found really helpful that Scott shared, which was that your only comparison is your former self. Like your former self and your future self. Like you're not comparing to anyone else, which I know can be such a difficult thing to do.
That was
especially,
big.
Yeah. Like, you get on social media, you're looking at, the highlight reel of people's lives. It's just very easy for us to default to comparing to other people, but really the only comparison is to ourselves. So I wanted to call that out. The other thing that, as you both were chatting, I was like, what is the difference between self-actualization and transcendence? Because I heard them as two kind of distinct things, where self-actualization is about the self and transcendence is really about like going outside of yourself. And so like he talked about things like peak and plateau experiences. And I think peak experiences are, like maybe that's like you go to the Grand Canyon and you're like in awe of like just the miracle of nature and the expansiveness of it. But then like he talked about other sources that I thought was really helpful, because like sometimes when this idea is so big and looming, I'm like, well, I need the practical. What does this really mean day to day? And he talked about sources of transcendence as being things like experiencing a music concert, which I totally get. I mean, I still think and relive the Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert. Like, that was a huge moment in my life. And any Swiftie listening probably agrees. Or, moments in meditation, or when you're practicing yoga, or Courtney, you mentioned like when you're doing your morning pages, thank you. Like you got into a state of flow. And so I don't know, I just wanted to like call that out as something that maybe we do or don't want to talk about, is that the difference between transcendence and self-actualization is being within the self versus like going outside of the self.
The oneness. Can I just say, because I'm guessing Bill has not experienced a Taylor Swift concert, and I want to say that I do think that is actually a good, like, you're talking about the practicality, right? And oneness is this obscure thing that happens in Nepal, right? In the mountains. And, but there is a oneness to being in a huge arena with 40,000 people all experiencing the same thing, getting the same goosebumps, and feeling a unity in that experience of joy, of I love this, you love this. We're all having just this peak moment together, and you're bonded by it. And I think that that's a great way to think about it. Choose your concert, choose your group experience, life,
Yeah.
I think that's great.
You're talking about, for the Taylor Swift, which, yes, I have not experienced, but I could talk about a lot of David Bowie concerts. You're talking about, by the way, community and shared experiences, creates those amazing experiences. I want to go back to something that Sahar said just a moment ago about not comparing yourself to others. I think that's so healthy. What a great point. I often talk to people about comparing yourself to other people. You're creating false positives and false negatives. If you compare yourself to somebody who's not as apt as you, you're creating this false positive, oh, I'm good or I'm better. If you compare yourself to somebody who is more apt than you in a particular something or other, then you're feeling poorly about yourself. And you're not winning here. The other day I went bowling. I'm trying to self-actualize a lot lately by daily experiences where I'm living intentionally, because the abundance of things that one can do in life are amazing, and I have the time and the focus. So I went bowling. And the guy I was bowling with, and our wives were there, he was very competitive. And I said to him at one point, he goes, "Oh, you're doing better than me." I says, "I'm not bowling against you. I'm bowling against me." Just like in golf, I do the same thing with golf. I don't need or want or desire. So this comparison thing, I think, is so important in terms of self-transcendence. Oh, that person has gotten there, is doing that. Can only make you feel good or bad about yourself, and has nothing to do with anything. And I loved how Scott, reaffirmed that, which is, this is your own unique journey. This is who you are and where you want to go, and no one can take that away from you.
And that there's no time limit.
And no time limit. I love that. So there's no burden, no responsibility. Take your time. Matter of fact, the longer it takes you to get there, the better.
Yeah, I think the last thing that I wanted to say, that it reminded me of something that we talked a lot about in MAP, which was, where you put your attention is, Scott said, it's where you put your life. And so this whole idea of attention and intention is something that I'm definitely going to take away from the conversation between Bill and Scott.
Yeah, me too, by the way. Intention, living life with intention, on purpose, in and of itself is a great North Star. It's like, oh, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go today, the next month, the next 5 years? Think about it and then act on that.
Yeah. On purpose and with purpose.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. On purpose and with purpose. Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Sahar and Courtney, what a pleasure for us to have this chat. Obviously, there's so much more in that episode and in Scott's work that we could discuss. And for those of our listeners that are interested in this, I'd recommend another listen to that podcast, because I think each time you listen to it, you're going to come up with new things to think about and new ways to think about them. So for this edition of the After Show, I'm Bill Groner, your host, and we thank you for joining us.
Yes. And okay, Bill, you acknowledged Sahar, and you acknowledged me, and you acknowledged Scott's work. But Bill, I appreciate you bringing this all together and giving us a place to all take part in this conversation in oneness on the Substack, the Connection Effect Substack. So please find that and add your voice to this conversation, because I'm sure we've only just scratched the surface of all of the things that we could talk about from this conversation.
Awesome, Courtney. Sahar, have a great day.
You too. Bye, Bill. Bye, Sahar.
Bye, guys.